Welcome to the FCAN webinar, Yes, College is Worth It. I'm your host, Kathy McDonald, FCAN's Assistant Director for Network Partnerships with the Florida College Access Network. I am so excited to welcome on our call today guest presenter Robert Weissert, who's Executive Vice President and Counsel to the President with Florida Tax Watch. Robert oversees the research agenda and coordinates efforts to increase government efficiency, improve accountability, and enhance effectiveness. Before joining Florida Tax Watch in 2007, Robert worked in Washington, D.C. as a policy analyst for the majority staff of the U.S. Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship and was a research analyst for the Congressional Research Service. Robert has a JD from the University of Virginia School of Law and a BA with honors in political economics and political theory and constitutional democracy from James Madison College at Michigan State University. Robert was selected for the Leadership Florida's Connect Florida Leadership Institute class. Before we get started with today's presentation, a few quick housekeeping items. First, we welcome your questions. This is all about us learning together, so please submit your questions in the box on your dashboard, which you should see in the right side of your screen if you're viewing from a desktop computer. We will allot time for questions at the end, but I do encourage you to submit your questions at any time so that we can queue those up. Second, please share what you're learning on your favorite social media platform. You will find the FCAN on Twitter at FL College Access and our webinar partner at Florida Tax Watch. Please use the hashtag FCAN so that we can find you. Finally, this webinar is being recorded. All materials will be available within a week of the recording. You can find a copy of the slides in your webinar dashboard along with a copy of the report that Robert will be speaking about. For those of you who are not familiar with FCAN, our mission is to create and strengthen a statewide network that catalyzes and supports communities to improve college and career readiness, access, and completion for all students. Our vision is to see at least 60% of working age Floridians hold a high quality post-secondary degree or credential by the year 2025, which is what labor economists predict we will need in order for our residents to be ready for tomorrow's jobs. We do our work in three primary ways. First, through our local college access networks. We have 16 of them now formed across the state of Florida that support over 81% of Florida residents. These are cross-sector strategic alliances that collaborate to provide more support for student success. The second way we do our work is through our research, data, and policy, acting as a clearinghouse on data in the college and career readiness space. And the third way is through our statewide initiatives that provide schools and community organizations free resources to help students plan for their future. Now, to get us started today, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you all so that we can make sure we are meeting your needs on this webinar today. So, let's start by asking you all, what type of organization are you with? Is it higher education, a K through 12 school district, a community organization, a government agency, or other, perhaps a funder? So if you can go ahead and vote right now, that would help us guide our discussion. Let's give that about 2 more seconds here. Okay, let's go ahead and close that out. So it looks like on the call today, about 42%, let me go ahead and share that, about 42% of you are with higher education institutions and 42% are with community organizations, and then we've got a few government folks and a few others. So thank you, appreciate that. Let's go ahead and hide that, fabulous. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. Many of us, particularly in the education and higher education space, have heard the statistic that someone with a bachelor's degree will earn $1 million more over their lifetime than someone with a high school diploma or GED. While it can vary by degree and occupation, earning a college degree is often worth it for the individual, but is college a wise investment for our taxpayers? Florida Tax Watch did an analysis to find out. You can find that report on their website at www.floridataxwatch.org. As I said, you can also find a link to it in your dashboard if you want to pull it up and have it handy while we're talking. Their analysis was created with the generous support of the Helios Education Foundation. Now, Robert, we knew there was an individual benefit to going to college, and we had some sense that there was a community-wide benefit, but your organization actually took the time to figure out what that larger benefit to taxpayers and communities actually is. Please walk us through your findings.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kathy, and it's an honor to be with you here. I am Robert Weissert with Florida Tax Watch, and Florida Tax Watch is a nonpartisan, nonprofit public policy research institute based in Tallahassee, but covering all of the state of Florida. And really, we are the eyes and ears of Florida taxpayers. So it's our role to do things like identify the return on investment for government programs and identify opportunities for government to improve efficiency, not only of operations, but of long-term investments that will benefit the state of Florida and its citizens. Let me say before I get to that, I am joined by two people here slightly off screen. To my right is Izzy Ellis, who coordinates these things for Florida Tax Watch. So thank you so much for her work working with Kathy and her great team. And I'm also joined by Bob Nave, who is the Vice President of Research and for Florida Tax Watch, oversaw this research effort, as well as all the efforts that Florida Tax Watch does. I'm not joined by, but would also want to thank Rick Harper, Dr. Richard Harper, formerly of the University of West Florida. He's a prominent economist in the state of Florida, formerly the chief economist for the Florida State Senate. And he conducted the REMI analysis here, which actually quantifies the return on investment. And we'll get into those numbers a little bit later. I would also say for that poll, it was great to see all these partners on this call. And if as a non-voting person on the poll, if like a Senate president, I get to cast a deciding vote, then we are a nonprofit as well. So as a community organization, I want to thank all of you in the higher education space, the community space, and everyone else for joining us today. I do think this is incredibly timely because we are coming up on the July 1st, which is the start of the state's new fiscal year. I think that's one of the ways that people really use this, and one of the values of Tax Watch undertaking this kind of research, which is to show the legislature and ultimately the taxpayers what the return on investment for their role in funding the state college system is. That's especially important for the state college system because state funding and student tuition are basically the major areas of funding for state colleges. When you get into some other aspects of post-secondary education, there are other funding mechanisms and there are other avenues of funding, but those are really the major two for the state college system. So when we were able to have an opportunity here working with the Helios Foundation and also the Association of Florida Colleges, and I want to give them credit, great credit to the leaders of those state college institutions who collaborated with us on this report, we can really show the people who are paying into the system what they're getting out of it. That's the taxpayers of Florida and the students themselves. So my presentation here does cover and summarize essentially the Florida Tax Watch report. Kathy put up a great slide there. Like all Florida Tax Watch reports, it's available for free to everyone on our website at floridataxwatch.org. As a nonpartisan, nonprofit public policy research institute, we provide all of our information for free to anyone who could find benefit from it. And we certainly hope that you will and that you'll use it. So my presentation goes through sort of a background about the state college system and some of the measures of quality that we're able to use when we look at the system as a whole, but then really focuses on the return on investment, and that's for the taxpayers and the students themselves. So jumping right into the first slide about the college system itself, there are 28 institutions that make up the state college system, and it is the primary access point for an undergraduate education for nearly 1 million Floridians, many of whom are recent graduates or returning adult students. There is an opportunity for people still completing their high school degrees to earn college credits as well. That would be another interesting aspect of the system to look into, where students are able to achieve their post-secondary education cheaper and faster by having a collaboration between their high school and the state college system. It is something that we looked at and we spoke about. We ultimately didn't include that in our scope of this report, but it is another element of this system and how it does provide value. Most of the state college system attendees are Florida residents, and most of them actually are from within the community that their institution serves. So we did this analysis at a statewide level. We are working with a few individual colleges that are interested in finding out what their regional impact will be, and that's going to show, I think, very positive. We don't have the numbers yet, but I think that's going to show very positive, because a significant number of those individuals do stay in the communities where they receive that education, and so the benefits directly flow back to the people of that community. But overall, a number of these graduates stay within the state. That often comes up, and we work closely with Chancellor Marshall Kreiser, and recently at a Tax Watch meeting, he was talking about that export of talent that comes out of our state university system. It's something they're very aware of. I think he pointed out that the data show it's actually less than a lot of people think. People think anecdotally they know of a son or daughter or family member who received a education from our state university system, then moved to another town, maybe Atlanta or New York or Chicago or Washington, D.C. But statistically, a lot of those individuals stay in Florida, but statistically from the state college system, almost all of the graduates stay here in Florida. So there's a lot of benefit that can be shown immediately to the taxpayers and to the individual students, and we'll show what those numbers are. And we do account for the number that would leave and go out of state or ultimately not utilize their degree when we come to those numbers at the end. Specifically, the state college system offers a number of benefits. Again, for the individuals, affordability is one of the biggest ones. Flexibility is also important, whether it's people going straight through from high school or returning adult education students. There's also a wide array of certificates that are offered and abilities to pursue degrees that directly translate into workforce shorter than a 4-year degree, although a number of these programs also offer 4-year degree programs, and those tend to be in targeted areas like nursing, where there's significant demand for those graduates, and there is a lot of connectivity between the state college system and the state university system, where those credits transfer from underclass persons to overclassmen to nearer to graduation from a state university system. And again, I mentioned outside of the scope of our analysis, but there is also opportunity for high school students to earn college credits that can then be transferred either to college system schools or to state university system institutions, all of which help to increase the access and affordability of post-secondary education, which does have a lot of benefits. And I know Kathy pointed out at the beginning, and we really undertook this study with an eye to the idea of, is college worth it? And I like the title of this presentation. Yes, it is. I think there is more to that discussion, and I think it's a valuable discussion. There's obviously a continuum of post-secondary education opportunities that we need to think about in that discussion, but the number one takeaway for the legislature and for policymakers is that they need to realize that there is a significant value in post-secondary education and in making sure that these opportunities are available to the students and to the workforce of Florida. So we can use this study to really show that, and show some other things too, because as we get into some of the measures of quality, you'll see that there really is some great story to be told there. The mission of the state college system is to prepare students for workforce, and that's a really valuable role that is played. A number of the programs directly tie into economic development. They are certificates and degrees in areas where we specifically need a lot of healthcare, a lot of Now we're seeing more technical education, and that's a really, really important opportunity. Again, while also providing, as we talked about, more flexibility, dual enrollment opportunities, and opportunities for credit transfers to other institutions. This analysis specifically looked at the return on investment, but we also looked at the quality. And one great measure of quality for the state college system is the Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence, which looks at more than 1,000 institutions throughout the nation and makes comparative determinations on quality. And Florida institutions do incredibly well at that. There's a number of things that they look at for these measures of quality. There are always opportunities to improve, and these metrics allow for these institutions to find how they can continuously improve. In a lot of areas, obviously, completion and transfer is very important because neither the student nor the institution, the taxpayers, want to make an investment in somebody that doesn't ultimately achieve their goal of attaining the education and the certificate and then not getting the benefits thereof. Also tying directly into the labor market, making sure that we have partnerships with the employers in the community so that we have students going through and getting the right degrees, the right credentials to make sure that they have an opportunity to be employed. And then a big part of the conversation right now is student debt. And again, the state college system does well in this. I know we're probably all aware of the significant focus on national student debt issues being brought up now in preparation for the 2020 presidential election. It is a major issue. It's a major issue in Florida across the continuum of higher education and post-secondary education. Certainly the state college system does very well with students graduating with no or low debt, and there's a number of reasons for that: affordability, but also the focus in the state college system on ability to work and to achieve degrees while continuing in the labor force and continuing to support a community or a family and the cost of your own education. So specifically with the Aspen Prize, many of the institutions here, about more than half, are eligible for that, which is a positive there. In fact, all of them are eligible, but many of the institutions have actually received these awards, and a couple of the highest awards in the past year have gone to institutions within the state college system. And we did shy a little bit away from calling out those specific institutions, but the list is pretty impressive as far as the number of awards that have been generated in Florida by Florida institutions, both the top awards and the more broader categories where a number of institutions receive that recognition. We do provide a significant, the state college system does provide a significant number of credentials, among the highest in the country. California provides more. Obviously, the demographics of California are significantly larger than Florida. And despite Florida's size in economy, we're the 16th or 17th largest economy in the world, population-wise, we're very close to places like New York, and the ones just down at 5th through 10th on the list are not very far behind the state of Florida. So the number of degrees that we provide through the state college system is impressive, because it obviously we're not going to meet California because of the simple demographics of the population, but places like Texas that are larger, and places like New York and Pennsylvania that really aren't far behind Florida in total number of population, and yet Florida is still providing a significantly more associate's degrees than many of those, and California and Texas are really the only ones that are ahead of us at all in a number of these categories. So we're second or third. That also is true when it comes to affordability, and I'll show a slide in a couple of slides about our ranking nationally on affordability, R again being the Florida's post-secondary institutions, but what this shows is that the tuition and fees have held very steady for the state college system. This is really important. Again, with the discussion of student debt, we've seen a lot of discussion about the rising cost of post-secondary education and affordability and access issues that come along with that. Also, as I mentioned, the tuition is a very important funding element of the state college system institutions. Basically, there's two, the biggest pots of money are from tuition and from government support from taxpayer appropriations. So the fact that the institutions have been able to really hold the line on those costs is very impressive, and we can see a lot of cyclical nature of the costs that come along with these institutions because of the economy itself and where students are attending and how much it costs to keep faculty, especially in some of the technical areas where it can be hard to retain faculty when there is so much demand for those faculty to be working in the fields. So the fact that they have been able to keep tuition so low relatively and remain flat for about the last 7 years is wonderful. And again, the comparative to the rest of the nation are very favorable. The next slide shows where Florida actually fits in there. So in 2 years, we're in the top 10, and in 4 years, we're in the top 3 as far as the cheapest, lowest cost, which is a positive thing. The 2-year graduation rates are very positive. We have nearly 50% of full-time students complete their degree within 2 years. And one of the important metrics for understanding the competitiveness and quality overall nationally is the graduation rate. And we are second only to South Dakota. I talked a lot about California, Texas, New York, other large states in previous slide on total number of certificates attained. But when we look at completion rate or graduation rate, South Dakota is the only state higher. And if you understand anything about the demographic makeup of the state of Florida compared to South Dakota, it is significantly different. Also, just the sheer number of institutions in South Dakota versus the number in Florida, and the total number of degrees attained in South Dakota versus the overwhelmingly more in Florida. The fact that we're even close to them is impressive in and of itself. But in some ways, it's almost unfair to compare Florida to South Dakota. We didn't want to cherry pick the data here. Florida is second, but there's a lot of caveat to that you could certainly make the argument that for reasons of demographics and total number attained and number of institutions, that it's a little unfair to compare Florida to South Dakota, but we're well ahead of the other states that are more demographically similar to Florida. So overall, that's a really positive thing. And again, tying back into the ROI, it's really important because you're going to significantly lower your return on investment if you have students and taxpayers who are funding an education for a degree that is not completed, because then you're really not going to see that ROI. So a high graduation rate helps to ensure that we're achieving that return on investment. For enrollment, overall, we have seen enrollment increase. Again, there is some economic impact here, or economic factors at play here. The cyclical nature of the economy. We see enrollment go up at times of recession. We see enrollment fall at times of strong economic growth. Right now, we're in a time of extraordinarily strong and prolonged economic growth, with Florida's unemployment rate just barely over 3%. So where we saw that spike, that last peak before it started trickling down, was a time when Florida's unemployment rate was double digit. And again, this is important for two reasons. Even though it is trickling down, it is not on a significant downward trend, where overall, if you were to draw a trend line across there over these the time covered in this analysis, you would see that it is trending upward. So that is a positive thing, and the ROI is good, and the costs to remain low. And that's really important because as the enrollment fluctuates, maintaining those costs, maintaining average cost per student, maintaining tuition at a consistent level is both a challenge and a really positive thing for the system itself. This is the next slide is an analysis of the 2-year college enrollment in the United States compared to Florida, compared to nationally, and what we see here is that that Florida falls on the continuum here in the national levels of enrollment. But I want to move on to the return on investment, which is the next slide, where we really get into the meat of our analysis here. There's a few ways that we look at return on investment. The added revenue is how we get a return on investment for the state of Florida. Also, the added business outcome, which is a measure of state gross domestic product, is how we measure that. That's essentially the additional economic activity generated by these graduates based on the difference of having these certificates. So another way to look at it is the reduced demand for services. When we see there's a significant amount of evidence that shows that people who have higher educational attainment have lower need for social services. Specifically, you can think of things like Medicaid and other very expensive social services. So again, every dollar invested in education and in post-secondary education can reduce a dollar that needs to be spent tomorrow on funded social services. And for every dollar invested, this is sort of jumping to the conclusion here, and I'll go back through some of the details of how we found this. For every dollar invested, the taxpayers fully recover their original investment and receive an additional nearly $6 in return on investment. So the students are going to get a positive return on investment, as I'll show in future slides, for their money invested in their own education, but also the taxpayers as a whole generate a significant return on investment for the money that they are pumping into the state college system in order to achieve these positive outcomes and then receive the benefit through improved gross state product and improved revenue for the students. So Florida does make a significant investment in each student that goes to the state college system. If we take the funding as a whole through the institutions, which are put into the budget as general lump sum, then we see that it comes out to about $4,500 per student. And most of those students are ultimately receiving their degree, which is very positive. We do have a very high return on investment, and for every $1,000 invested in the college system, we receive almost $10 for every student that actually graduates. So again, the numbers change a little bit when you look at every dollar invested and when you look at every dollar invested for one who actually graduates, because even with the high graduation rate, we saw previously that the highest was South Dakota with just over 60%. You're never going to achieve 100%, but even calculating for the accounting for those students that don't ultimately complete the degree, we do see a significant return on investment of almost $6. And if we look at only those who graduated, we're getting closer to $10. And that is actually the highest in the country as far as return on investment for the graduates who do complete their education and achieve the certificate and the credentials for it. Looking past the state and the taxpayers, looking at the individual student, we see that there are a significant number of types of benefits, and there are different ways we can calculate that. We can look at work-life expectancy. We can look at their employment rate. We can look at the net benefits, which is taking into account the cost of the education, because it's not just the dollar amount that they pay to tuition. It's also an opportunity cost and foregone income during the years where they are working on achieving the degrees. Although, again, if we looked at things like the dual enrollment high school students, then we could actually reduce that further. This analysis didn't do that, but it would show that lower, because during those years before they achieve a high school degree, the opportunity cost is almost nothing for the time spent working towards their post-secondary degree. But time spent after high school graduation does have an opportunity cost, and we did take that into account. Again, trying to make sure that we were being conservative in our estimates. Working with Dr. Rick Harper, we determined that we needed to take into account opportunity cost for lost wages during the years where the students are achieving the degree, even though we knew we were ignoring the possibility that they could go into this degree program already having some credits, and also the fact that a significant number of these students actually do work while they are in school. So their opportunity cost is significantly reduced, because it's not that their opportunity cost would be to make a salary or to go to school where the salary is zero. They're actually working while they're going to school. A significant number of the state college system students do so. So we could have used that to lower the input cost and ultimately achieve a higher net. We did not, because we wanted to make sure that we were being conservative. So we took that into account and ultimately decided that we wanted to have a more conservative number. So we go ahead and assume that there is a higher opportunity cost than evidence probably shows that there is. So to quantify the return on investment, we lay out here what the various degree completers, the program completers are. Obviously at the far one end of the spectrum is the BAS and BS degrees, the full BAS and BS. You're going to have the highest work income expectancy compared to high school only on that side of the spectrum, but you're also going to have the highest student costs, because that's generally a 4-year degree instead of a 2-year degree. So that is both the tuition cost and the opportunity cost combined together. You take those and you subtract those from the added work life expectancy earnings, and what we come up with is more than $800,000 in benefit to those 4-year degree programs, and nearly $500,000 at the lower end for the 2-year degree. Again, that's during work life expectancy. So there's a complicated breakdown of how we exactly calculate that for all of the different students in an aggregate amount, but we're looking at approximately 30 years when you're talking about work life income expectancy. The payback period is the amount of time it takes for the student to break even from their costs, both the direct cost of tuition and the opportunity cost, and that ranges, it's basically about 2.5 to 4 years, depending on the program. And the student ROI is the percentage return on investment, so you can think of that compared to like a 401k. What is your overall expected return on investment over a long time horizon? And we see it's in double digits. So for all of these, even those ones that have the highest cost up front and the highest opportunity cost, which is our 4-year degree, we still see a double-digit return on investment of 10.5%, up to some of the faster degrees that are able to be completed earlier, and many of those come into high-wage, high-skill, high-demand jobs. And so over life expectancy, you're going to see a return of more than 13%. And so that's a great return on investment for the individual students. Next, I want to just talk really briefly on this. We use the REMI model, which is the Regional Economic Modeling, Inc., and it is probably the gold standard for dynamic forecasting, dynamic modeling of the effect on the economy and return on investment. It spits out in really 3 ways, and I'll go through a slide that touches on each of those 3 ways. But overall, this is basically as good as it gets, using the REMI model to make these determinations. The output of the REMI model, the results, is on the next slide. And as I said, we had a lot of different ways of calculating this. The payback window, which is the number of years, about 2.5 to 4 years that it takes for the individual student to regain or to come back to net zero from the cost that they've invested. And then over the 30-year lifetime is another way to look at it, and that's where we get to numbers like $500,000 to $800,000 in long-term added benefit. Then we can look at it as per every $1 invested, for every $1,000 invested, for every $1 invested in the program, for every $1 invested in a graduate. But if we look at a kind of a median version of all of those, it's the 10-year return on investment. So these are a breakdown of the 10-year return on investment for general revenue. So the first one is for the state of Florida. For every $1 invested, the return on investment is a little under $5 to a little under $7 in GDP, which is gross domestic product, which is a measure of the total productivity of the state. Again, that puts us, our state's GDP puts us as about the 16th or 17th largest economy in the world, and we're adding significantly to the state GDP for all of these graduates. It also generates between $9 and $13 in additional personal income. Again, that's aggregated throughout the state, so that's based on $1 invested by the taxpayers. And it produces a general addition in Florida output, which is essentially a measure of how much our economy is producing. And so economic output is a very important measure for the state overall, especially for Florida, because if we think about it as a transaction-based economy or a transaction-based funding mechanism for our state, about 80% of total taxes are generated through some type of transaction tax. That's not just the sales tax, that also includes things like the gross receipts tax and the insurance premium tax and the motor fuel tax, which is the gasoline tax. So if you add all those together, most of state revenue is generated through transaction taxes. So increase in state output is an important measure. So the first one is looking at a 10-year, and then the second one is over the expected work life of FCS completers, which again, that's a complicated formula. It's not simply a matter of 30 years, but it approximately is 30 years across the board. It breaks down differently for the various demographics, men versus women, it's different. Direct from high school versus adult learners, the work expectancy is different. And based on different degree achievement, the work expectancy is different. And again, there's academic literature that we based all of these inputs on that show basically, depending on who you are and what type of work you're doing, what degree you attained, we can estimate on the aggregate what your work life expectancy will be, whether it's in the lower 20s for some positions, and an easy one to think of would be like positions in public safety tend to be on the lower end of the 20-year spectrum, or some of the things that require a BS or BAS tend to be in the longer end of that spectrum, closer to 30 years, although the demographics of the individual degree attainer do come into play a lot there, and how long it took them to earn the degree, et cetera. So there we see those same numbers from the first 3 bullet points, but they're higher because we're looking at a longer time horizon. Always in looking at time horizons, one of the problems is to get the legislature to understand the importance of time horizons. In Florida, of course, we have term limits. So you're talking about making an investment today, and if I show you what the 30-year return on investment is, that might not move the needle as much as when we can see that in just 10 years, we can see a very positive return on investment. So we did present this data in a number of ways, and I think they're all really valuable to understanding in detail the picture, and that's why we have the report out there. So if you're the kind of person that likes to go through and look at all those detailed methodologies, it's there in the report. If you're closer on the spectrum to the Florida legislature and you just want the gist of it, the gist is that yes, college is worth it. We did do some comparison between a 2013 analysis and a 2019 analysis. Ultimately, it shows that that we are continuing to find similar positive returns. There were some differences. It was not Florida Tax Watch that did the 2013 analysis. I think some of our assumptions were intentionally more conservative. I mentioned the opportunity cost, where we assume 100% opportunity cost, even though we know statistically that we could have been safe assuming closer to 40 or 50 or 60% opportunity cost. But we are very comfortable with the methodology that we chose, but we wanted to put in here some comparisons to help understand how our analysis differed from, in all reasonable ways, the 2013 analysis, but ultimately, again, giving the legislative thumbnail snapshot, both show a very positive return on investment for the students and the taxpayers. So I do want to kind of skip to the end here. I know we're getting short on time. I want to make sure that we can make leave enough time for some good questions or thoughts or feedback. I did mention at the beginning, we do continue to focus on this space. I think it's really important as we talk about economic development, workforce development, the talent pipeline, what the future of Florida is, the fact that we don't have a talent gap, we have an opportunity gap, and we need to make sure that that we can keep our workforce working, our state competitive globally, because we're past the age of comparing or competing with just California and New York. We're now competing with Taiwan and Singapore and Western Europe and a variety of places all over the globe. So I want to, Tax Watch will continue to focus on all of these things, and one of the ways that we'll do that is to continue to look at individual institutions, especially some of our larger institutions, which tend to be located geographically in Southeast Florida. but there are valuable institutions that provide an incredible service to their community and their state throughout Florida, and we hope to continue to work with them to tell the story through data so that policymakers and informed and interested stakeholders such as yourselves can see what a group that really crunches the numbers. That's what we do. What the world looks like to us in kind of a numbers format. So with that, I'd be Kathy, honored to answer any questions or continue the conversation in a different way.
Thanks, Robert. That was a phenomenal summary and so many good points you made in there. I would love to pause for a second as we're making time for folks to submit their questions to really get a sense of how do they see themselves using the information in this report. And you can vote for as many of those options as you will. So if folks can go ahead and start voting. We're looking at how are you using the data, and do you anticipate using it for case making, for informing parents and students on the value of going to college, perhaps informing your policymakers and community leaders, demonstrating the value of college on a community's economic well-being, or some other reason? So go ahead and vote now. Give us a sense of where you think you can use this. Keep that open for about another couple of seconds here. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and close that out and let me share the results so Robert can also see, and our audience can see. 70% are planning on using it to inform parents and students. 50% anticipate using it for case making. 45% for informing policymakers. 75% for demonstrating the value of college on a community's economic well-being. And we have 25% other. So if you other folks wouldn't mind sharing in the question box, maybe some of the ways that you think you might use that so we can hear your input in how this research is valuable to you. So let me go ahead and hide that. And Robert, I'll go ahead and share my webcam as well. Join you there. We do have several questions. Oops, let me get to the top here. Whoops. Let's jump down to, on the quantifying students' ROI, please break out what AA, AAS, and AS stand for. So those are just acronyms, but if you can share that with our audience, that would be great. Ooh, Robert, you're muted.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. Yes, AAA, sorry, we are so bad about using acronyms for everything, so I apologize for not having thought to break that out. AA is the Associate of Arts degree. That's generally a 2-year degree. AS is Associate of Science degree, also generally a 2-year degree. Can you remind me what the AAS is? And then the BS and BAS is the Bachelor's of Arts, which is a 4-year degree. I know that these are broken down in the report itself in a footnote, and I don't have, oh, here it is. It is the Associate of Applied Science is AAS. So that's AA is Associate in Arts, AAS is Associate of Applied Science, AS is Associate in Science, and the BAS/BS is a Bachelor of Applied Science, Bachelor of Science. And typically the first 3 are a 2-year track, and the last one is a 4-year track, although normal time does extend that out a little bit. It's not necessarily a 2-year or 4-year completion because there are a number of other factors that come into students' lives, and that's one of the great things that we had up on the slide at the very beginning, that one of the values is flexibility. And when we talk to stakeholders in the state college system, the flexibility of the state college system and of these institutions was one of the things that we heard is of great value. So not everybody completes a 2-year degree track in 2 years, but that's what those are.
Great, great. That's really helpful. Yes, we in education do like our alphabet soup, don't we? So Chloe has a question for you. Florida tracks workforce outcomes through FETPIP, sorry, FETPIP, another alphabet. The recent data reveals in 2016-2017, the last reported year, that approximately 20% of graduates with a bachelor's degree were not found working. How would this affect their work life, income expectancy, and the overall taxpayer investment? How does workforce attrition play a role in the figures presented today? And simply put, if a graduate finds a job 6 months after completion but jumps job to job, can the story be told by data? Might be a little messier, but what are your thoughts?
It can be, absolutely. And one of the great things about doing public policy analysis in Florida is the amount of data that we collect, especially in the education space, the department's education data warehouse, and the great job that the Department of Education and the Board of Governors does in collecting this kind of data and making it available for researchers like us is very important. We do see a lot of that transitional employment that can be accounted for. And there even is included in that ways to account for the transitional unemployment. When we talk about unemployment numbers, those tend to be people who have been unemployed for less than 6 months. When they're more than 6 months, they go into the labor force participation rate, which is a different metric of overall employment in a state. But we do see some transitional unemployment where people are unemployed for a short time as they move between jobs within the same career. We know that the generation that is graduating college now and has been for the last 5 or 6 years, and the sweet spot of the data that we're talking about, it's often said that they'll change careers more times, and their parents may have changed jobs. All of that is accounted for, and the non-working is accounted for. Also the attrition, because even though a number of these graduates do stay in the state, some do leave. So all of that we use in the footnotes. We account for by taking a percentage of the aggregate number. So that percentage is based on the actual data, but we're not tracking it at an individual level. We're aggregating that data because of the sheer number of students. When we go down and look at an individual institution, those numbers will change because in different communities, the numbers are different, but on an aggregate level, that data informs us of how to make the assumption on an aggregate level for the system wide. But all of that is those assumptions and those aggregate factors are based on the actual data that is collected. And again, that's one of the great things about Florida. Not every state can you get that kind of data on people that have already graduated and what their work situation is.
Yeah, great. And it is. Paths are so different for people. And so there is kind of that 10,000 foot view and then the individual story level. So it's great. You've got ways to kind of take that into account. Our friend Brandy with Complete Florida is sharing that they are planning to use the data to help convince returning adult learners that it is indeed worth it to finish what they started, which I think is an interesting population in terms of applying your research, because we do want more of those adult learners who have started a credential. As you talked about, the outcomes are better if you finish whatever credential it is you started. For those, trying to encourage people to come back and finish that credential. Is there any particular data point you think is helpful in terms of helping those adult learners think about the value of coming back?
Absolutely. I think just the pure ROI for the students is what can tell them that story. And again, we do assume that the student is taking the full term to complete that. So if they come in with some credits already, whether it's because of dual enrollment or because they had started a degree and will now be picking it back up, or whether they continue to work. And again, the flexibility of a lot of these institutions allows people to work. So if you already come in with some credits from a previous stint in post-secondary, and then you can continue in your career while working towards that education, your costs are going to be lower. But basically the payback period is less than 4 years. So even if you do take off from the workforce and you go focus solely on that education and you don't have that many credits when you're coming back into it, the period for you to see your individual break-even point is not very far down the road. So I think those are all really positive points, and I certainly commend those institutions. We've heard that from a lot of people that are really focused on how do they work with those students that have some credits to finalize that degree and really take the next step in their career to generate these benefits. And I know when they have those conversations, it's always focused on the benefits to the individual, and that's good, that's the right conversation. But what our research shows is that there's really benefit to the state and the community as well. So that's a great effort, and I certainly commend you for using our research in that way, because I think that's a really important part of what these institutions on the individual level can do.
Yeah, and especially since you're sharing that, for many people, they may have a 30-year career. If they're, 10 years in, there still is a lot of years left where they can see the benefit of making that investment. And, one of the questions that we're always looking to is not only helping that individual, but how do we put it in context for employers and community leaders to be thinking about, yes, it's important to help those adult learners come back. So great perspective there. Buddy asked the question, does the ROI adjust for inflation, and is it in terms of present value or future value?
The return on investment is in present dollars. It does account for inflation. That's done through the model. It assumes a rate of inflation. I'm not sure what it is, but I know that it does assume a rate of inflation over that 30 years, and that's present discounted value. So that
Great.
essentially is real dollars. It accounts for inflation and for the future value of money, and comes up with what the return on investment is for a dollar today versus a future dollar in today's terms.
Okay, great. Laura is asking, do we have any breakout ROI between BA and BS degrees, which I know the Florida colleges system focuses a lot more on AA and AS, but we are starting to see more of the bachelor's degrees. So do you have that breakout as well?
We don't.
Okay.
I think we really looked a lot at the BAS and the BS for the college system, because a lot of those 4-year degrees that are being provided through the state college system tend to be more in the BS, tend to be more in the nursing degree sector. There are a number of BA, so I don't want to discount those, but we didn't look specifically at that. And I think one of the other questioners pointed out rightfully or correctly, and obviously someone familiar with the data, people after my own heart, there is a lag time for this data. So, there's a couple of years lag time, and the transition to a 4-year BS and BA for the state college system, while it started a number of years ago for some of the institutions, it has trickled through over the years. So we see that still as emerging in the data. But no, we did not focus on the BA specifically.
Okay, great. Ryan is asking if we have statistics regarding job career retention with college graduates. So if I'm understanding this correctly, and Ryan, feel free to send in another question if I'm understanding you incorrectly, are we looking to analyze, are people more apt to stay in a job or career if they're a college graduate versus not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm trying to think of the ways that would be broken out. I think the simplest answer is no. If there is, I'm not aware of it, and it wasn't used for this analysis about staying within a specific job or even within a specific industry or career. But I do know that what we did include and what is reflected in this analysis is the different career paths associated with the degrees attained as far as work-life expectancy. So the work-life expectancy is different, and that accounts for other things like not only retirement time, but transitional unemployment and other things. So in a way, yes, it's included in the aggregate level of that data, but I'm not aware of an ability to, and I know we didn't for this analysis, determine what the number of job or career switches would be. But on the aggregate level, it is reflected in that because the total work-life expectancy is different for each level of degree attained. And that's true for high school only as well. The work-life expectancy is different, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. It depends on the degree itself, and that's all based on, that's actually based on largely national data. As a question earlier about the specific tracking of Florida employment, that is reflected in our assumptions as well, but a lot of this comes from national data simply because of the ability to have a lot more data points to make a determination about what is the work-life expectancy, accounting for transitional unemployment, accounting for retirement age, accounting for age at degree attainment, and what do we expect the work life to look like for anyone, not student X, but for a population based on a degree attainment.
Well, and as you brought up, there are statistics out there, that suggest people will make a certain number of career changes throughout their lives, which you alluded to earlier. So, that's kind of the nature of the beast of our dynamic work world these days. Chloe did share that they're going to be using the data to help individuals on the autism spectrum disorder to pursue higher education to improve their opportunities in competitive employment. So great use of the data there. Whoops, I just scrolled the wrong way here. Ronit is asking, um, should we increase public investment in higher education, and would these investments be subject to diminishing returns? Great question there.
Absolutely. The position of Florida Tax Watch is frankly yes. We need to be careful about how we make that investment. What this report shows is that investment in the state college system does have a high return. I don't think we're achieving that diminishing marginal return level, and we can do that through some of those enrollment statistics compared to the cost, to the tuition cost, and the overall holding the line on costs. All of that does come into the return on investment per graduate and the ultimately diminishing margin return. Everything in economics will tell you that eventually you will hit a diminishing marginal return. I don't think we're near that yet in Florida. We don't have any evidence to indicate that we're near that. But I do want to be very clear. One of the things that Florida Tax Watch does in everything that we look at is that a dollar invested does not equal a dollar invested. That there is, $1 in the state college system may be a different return on investment than $1 in high school is different than $1 in pre-K is different than $1 at the state university system. There are different ways to invest money. And one of the things that's really positive here, and getting back to a little bit to the BA/BS question, the Bachelor's of Arts versus Bachelor's of Science, what we see in the state college system is a real focus on careers where there is demand for those careers. And that's been a point of discussion in a long time for both high school graduates and career track readiness, career versus college readiness, career and college readiness. All of these types of tracks, we need to be very careful about how we're investing that dollar. On the whole, yes, Florida Tax Watch remains supportive of investing more money in higher education because our workforce pipeline is the future viability of the state. And we are competing globally. Capital is more mobile than it's ever been. Jobs are more mobile than they've ever been. We'll continue to have great weather and a high quality of life, but we need to make sure that we have the talent and the workforce, or else really nothing else matters.
Yeah, it's such a great point, and we certainly are seeing that quite a bit through our LCANs, where our local college access networks, where they're trying to make sure that they are aligning the opportunities for students with the jobs that are actually available and growing in their community. As you alluded to, the nature of jobs in so many industries is changing, and so, you know, even adults need to be thinking about reskilling and re-careering as their own industries evolve and change. So we have about one more minute. Just final thoughts. You got a sense from the audience in terms of how they plan to use the data. How have you seen others use your analysis here?
Well, the biggest one for us has been to talk directly to policymakers and legislators and help them understand. A number of them represent communities that have these institutions, but even those that don't. You always have to talk to legislators about their investing the state's money, not money from their district. So they need to understand that even if it's not directly going into their community because they don't have an institution in their community, it is ultimately benefiting the state as a whole and benefiting the state coffers and therefore the people in their community. I was very pleased to see the way that people intend to use this, because I think it's not just for policymakers at the individual institution level. You can show that it's positive on your community. You can show your potential employers, your economic development community, those who are trying to bring employers in, and also private donors. That, private donors, it's not just government nowadays that wants to see a return on their investment. Private philanthropy dollars, private donors, graduates, people in the community, they all want to know that their dollar is making a difference, and we've shown that their dollar is making a difference when they invest it in the college system.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was phenomenal. For anyone who is not already a subscriber of FCAN, I encourage you to do so. That way you will make sure you stay on top of any future webinars, policy briefs, and promising practices that we share. A big thank you to Robert for helping us understand not only the ROI for a student, but for our communities, our state, and our taxpayers as well. Have a phenomenal day, and thanks for joining us today. Take care.
Thank you all.